What's up everyone, welcome to the video. We are here breaking down the NOCO 400 at the Paperclip Martinsville Speedway on Sunday, April 16th around 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's right, we're going short track racing once again, which is music to my ears, and it should be to yours as well, because short flat tracks are by far the most projectable track type for NASCAR DFS. And we've had practice, we've had qualifying, so we have tons of data points to point to. And we've already had 2 races in this aero package already at short flat tracks, including Phoenix and Richmond. So I'm not saying this is going to be the most exciting race in the world. I'm just simply excited for a projectable race, although I'm a sucker for Martinsville, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But anyway, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Chris Pennell. I break down NASCAR DFS each and every single week on this channel. You'll also find me live on Sunday mornings around 11 a.m. Eastern, answering all your guys' questions and just hanging out, having a good time, so I'd highly recommend you being there. And if you guys can do me one small thing in return, if you do enjoy today's free content, just leave a like on the video, subscribing to the channel if you are new can go a very long way, and I do appreciate that. And feel free to leave me a comment down below, being nice, being mean, ask me a question. I don't really care either way, but I'd love to hear from you. And really quick, shameless plug time, promo code CPEN, deposit match bonus up to $100 over on Underdog and Prize Picks. And yes, I'm a partner, so I have to say nice things, but I really do recommend playing on those websites. I do each and every single day and week, and I have a blast. So you can find the link down below in the description. Make sure you use promo code CPEN, and you'll get your deposit match bonus up to $100. All right, now that I sold my soul out to a couple of companies, let's talk some strategy here for Martinsville. And basically, the one thing that we have to remember at Martinsville is dominators, and oh yeah, dominators. We have 400 laps this weekend. Used to be 500. Unfortunately, they took 100 laps away from us, so there's not as many dominator points as we've had in the past, but 400 is still a decent chunk, similar to Richmond where we had 400 laps. So you're going to want at least 2 DOMs per lineup, and track position is very important at a track like this. Dating back to last year in this spring race, I remember we had Chase Elliott, William Byron near the front. They were super fast in practice. They had the track position to work with. Then we had guys like Truex and Denny Hamlin in the back with place differential, but just didn't really show that much speed in practice. They still had a ton of ownership, but guys like William Byron, Chase Elliott, I mean, they were in a much better position to accumulate dominator points and easily outscore the guys that place differential, because even if they do gain a good amount of spots during the race, the chances of them dominating is going to be pretty slim. I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe you get lucky on some pit strategy, but for the most part, the guys that are going to dominate are starting close to the front, and track position is very important here. So I'm not chasing place differential. I want guys with good track position, fast in practice, fast in qualifying, because they're probably going to stick there for the most part. I'm not saying you can't play any place differential. There's always a couple drivers here and there, though you're going to gain a lot of spots. Like Ross Chastain last year, he was starting in the 20s and he was able to gain a few spots, and by a few I mean a lot, finishing inside the top 5. So don't completely rule it out, but for the most part, I want guys that show me speed throughout the weekend, have been fast at the short flat tracks, and even if they're starting closer to the front, I'm okay with that, because if they can hold position, pick up some fast laps here and there, that's going to be just fine for compared to some of these guys starting near the back that have good place differential but we're slow and are kind of stuck there all day. And moving on to the driver by driver breakdown here, I got to mention a couple things first. So first off, if you want to join the best NASCAR DFS community out there, we got a couple hundred people over there. Links down below in the description or the pinned comment for that. I got projections for all the sites, sim scores, ownership, optimizers, articles breaking down cash games, tournaments, and my 24/7 Discord, which is hopping usually. And also if rankings, cheat sheets, algorithm power rankings, and things like that are your speed, I got that as well. And I do cover baseball each and every single day in a similar fashion if you're interested in that. So like I said, links down below in the description or the pinned comment if you want access. All right, so practice and qualifying just ended a few moments ago, so I'm not yet in projections, ownership, sims, or anything like that. We're just going through this together for the first time, so you get my first initial thoughts. And let me tell you, practice and qualifying was not as tame as I expected. It was kind of all over the place, and if we're looking at the practice numbers today, I don't think that just tells the whole story if you're just looking at them without context, because we knew Group 1 had a much faster track. Group 2 was slow overall. I'll accept William Byron because I don't know what's in his car, but it looks like they're cheating once again, which is fine with me because I want the cheaters in my lineups. But if we look at the practice results here, I did mark the guys in Group 2 as yellow, and as you can see, basically everybody that was in Group 2 is going to be near the bottom here. So overall, much slower track besides William Byron because, again, they got a couple extra horsepower in their car or whatever it may be. So when we're looking at the practice times, just keep that in mind that Group 2 was at a disadvantage. So while Kyle Larson was kind of mid-pack here, I mean, off the top of my head, it looks like around 15th. I don't think he's going to be the 15th best car. I think he's going to be much better than that. And some of these guys got an advantage being in the first group, so they might not be as fast as they look on paper. So that is something to keep in mind. Also, we do not have the most up-to-date odds because DraftKings FanDuel has not yet posted these. So we're looking at the ones pre-practice, which, speaking of pre, we have Ryan Preece here at plus 5,000. I assume that's going to go way down because he's on the pole, had a really fast qualifying run. So we'll start up top here with William Byron, $10,800 on DraftKings, $14K over on FanDuel. He's starting in 8th, was the odds-on favorite to win this race over in Vegas when lines dropped. And in my model, he was the favorite to win, and I don't think anything is going to change there when I rerun it. And while he's not starting on the pole or even in the top 5, he was in the slower group in practice, and he still was basically the best car. So there's no reason to believe that William Byron's not going to have a ton of speed. He's been the fastest driver at both short flat tracks this year, Phoenix and Richmond. As you can see, second or first in every single thing in practice. Or I guess third in the 5 lap. But he's fast in the short run, fast in the medium run, fast in the long run. I don't see any reason not to like William Byron here. And these power rankings are not up to date yet, so don't look at them specifically because I have to update them. And if we're looking at what he's done at Martinsville, he won this race last year, 3 top 5s, good chunk of laps led. If we're looking at the short flat tracks since last year, William Byron, some of the overall best numbers and the most dominator points. So yeah, sign me up for Willie B. I think he's fine for cash games and tournaments. And I'm hoping because he's the highest priced driver, his ownership will be lower than it should, because we saw last time at Richmond, he was high priced, he was starting near the front, he had a fast car, and I think he was in the teens in ownership. So if the field can make that same mistake once again, I'll be more than happy to be overweight. Kyle Larson, $10,600. He was in that second group as well with his teammate, obviously not quite as fast, but he's starting in 19th. And I'm not as interested in Kyle Larson as I am William Byron. I know he offers you more place differential, but I do trust William Byron at Martinsville more than I do Kyle Larson. This really isn't his best track type, but I think he can run well. But at $10,600, I need more than a good run. Like, I need better than a top 10. I need Kyle Larson to get up front, lead some laps, get some fast laps, which I'm not exactly sure that's going to be the case for him. Do I think he can be a top 5 contender? Sure. I mean, I see no reason why he can't be. But at the same time, at his price point, I need dominator points, and I feel like guys that are cheaper priced than him can offer me those dominator points, like, say, a Martin Truex Jr. starting in 5th. So I will have some Kyle Larson exposure, I imagine, but it definitely won't be as much as William Byron because I need those dominator points. And I can get place differential for cheaper. So I don't really want to play Kyle Larson just to get like a 6th place finish or something like that. Christopher Bell, $10,500. He's starting in 22nd. A driver that I thought would show a lot more speed. Keep in mind, though, he was in that second group, which was much slower overall. But yeah, it still wasn't very pretty, and he's the most recent winner here at Martinsville. We know he's great at short flat tracks. He was great at Richmond, great at Phoenix as well. But man, the practice times were not there, and I realize, again, slower group, but you also saw Kyle Larson faster than him in that group and William Byron. So at that point, I think I'd rather just play Kyle Larson over Christopher Bell because I just have a hard time seeing him getting up front and dominating. We will see. They're obviously going to make some adjustments, and I don't think Christopher Bell is going to be a guy that's on a fringe top 20 car or anything, but I'm just not sure it's going to be enough to dominate. That's kind of what we need at these price points here for a 400-lap race. Martin Truex Jr., $10,300. Pretty cheap over on FanDuel at 11.5. He's starting in 5th. Wasn't amazing in practice, and he was in that first group, so you'd kind of like to see him a little bit higher on the totem pole here, but we know how good he is at Martinsville. He was very fast at Richmond, kind of got screwed there at the end. So I think Truex is certainly in play as a GPP guy to dominate. I do think William Byron's going to be the guy in the highest tier price range that you're going to want that's going to dominate this race. But you can't rule Truex out, especially at a track like this. And like I said, it wasn't super fast in practice, but he said they threw everything they got at his car in qualifying to make adjustments, and he was pretty fast. So I think Truex is going to be in play for tournaments. Don't think I'd get there in cash games, though. Denny Hamlin, $10,100. He is starting at 11th, and I believe he was in that second group as well. So it wasn't super fast on paper, but if we were looking at the practice results here of the drivers in that second group, he was just behind Joey Logano at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which puts him 6th overall in that group. So I don't think his car is going to be that bad. And he did say in an interview after, I believe it was the first round of qualifying, that he thinks his car is going to be better than what it is, at least what it looks like to us. So I think Hamlin's another guy they have to have on your GPP radar, and we know how good he is at Martinsville at short flat tracks in general. If you look at the Martinsville numbers overall, only 2 drivers averaging more fantasy points per race the past few seasons, and that would be Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott. And Denny Hamlin, earlier in his career, absolutely exceptional here. Kind of has trailed off a little bit, but does have the second most laps led the past few seasons and was very good in this race last year. Dropping down to the 9K range, we have Joey Logano, 9,900 bucks. He's starting in 15th. Again, was in that second group, so the times aren't going to look as good, but was just a little bit faster than Denny Hamlin overall. And every single time we go to Martinsville, we have to have interest in the two Penske cars, Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney. So I'll definitely have some shares of Joey on both sides here, starting in 15th, because he can offer us a little bit more place differential upside. And I feel like he could be a very similar play to Kyle Larson, but I'm getting him around $1,000 cheaper. And if you're looking at the track history here in Martinsville, definitely looks a lot prettier for Joey. Average finish of 5.3, running position, the second best in the field, only behind Chase Elliott, and he's coming back with a broken leg. 3 top 5s in the top 10, 6 out of 6 times the past 3 years. So Joey Logano, while he wasn't super amazing on paper on Saturday, a lot of that could be attributed to being in Group 2, so I have no problem with him. Then we have Kyle Busch, 9,700 bucks, 10.5 over on FanDuel. He's starting mid-pack as well in 17th, couple extra spots behind Joey Logano. And I do prefer Joey over Kyle Busch. Busch just has not really had speed at the short flat tracks this year. Wasn't very good at Phoenix and wasn't very good at Richmond either. And in practice, wasn't bad, but keep in mind he was in that first group. So if we put him in the second group, I'm not really sure those numbers would look as good as they may. So Busch, not really the guy that I'm super interested in. I know he's ran well at Martinsville, obviously. He's been good just about everywhere in his career. But if you're looking at the past 6 races here, only 1 top 5, 4 top 10s, and not really any dominator points whatsoever. So I just have a hard time seeing him dominate, which is kind of what I'd want at nearly 10,000 bucks. I'm not saying Joey's the most likely guy to dominate, but with as good as he is as Martinsville, I think he's more likely to than Kyle Busch, at least pick up fast laps. And even then, I feel like Blaney and Kyle Busch could be at similar finishing positions by the end of the race. And at that point, why not start the guy that's starting double the spots further back with Ryan Blaney at 9,500 bucks. He's starting in 31st. Just one of those guys that's going to pop in optimizers, pop for cash games, and is going to have some decent ownership. Also didn't have a bad car in practice, just screwed it up in qualifying. And I know I said earlier, I'm not going to chase place differential, but there's always going to be a few drivers that can move through the field. Well, I think Ryan Blaney is one of those guys that can move through the field. We saw Ross Chastain do it last year. We saw a couple guys get stuck. With how good Ryan Blaney is here, I definitely think he's going to be a top 15 contender, which that's going to look pretty good starting in 31st. Now, there's always merit to fading a guy like this in tournaments at this ownership, which I think a pivot to like a Tyler Reddick, even a Chase Elliott, even a Joey Logano is perfectly fine in tournaments because the ownership's probably going to be pretty high. And every single week, it's the same old story with Ryan Blaney. He'll be running well. Then stage 2, he's got a penalty. He'll be a lap down. At some point, he'll get the lucky dog and kind of fight his way back to a decent finish. But it's just an absolute roller coaster rostering Ryan Blaney. But just look how good he is in Martinsville. I mean, pretty much the same exact numbers as Joey Logano, with even one more top 5, just not in the top 10 each and every single time, but always in the top 15. With some dominator points, I wouldn't really expect him to do anything in the dominator point section this weekend, but starting all the way back in 31st, if he contends for a top 10 by the end of the day, it's fine for cash games. But again, there is pivots to be had in tournaments because let's just say Tyler Reddick comes out, gets a lead, leads 100 laps. I'd rather have Reddick in my lineup with a good finish rather than Ryan Blaney fighting for, let's say, a top 15 back there. So things to keep in mind. Chase Elliott, 9,300 bucks. He's starting in 24th, and that price tag jumped out to me when it first dropped because if Elliott was completely healthy heading into Martinsville, I mean, he's probably right there with William Byron and Kyle Larson with his Hendrick teammates. Probably would be like the third or second highest priced driver. But with him, this being his first race back from a broken leg in a track like Martinsville, it's going to be a little bit difficult. But the price is nice. He's starting in 24th, though. Screwed it up in qualifying. I think he dropped with like the 3rd or 4th best odds to win this race over in Vegas, which again seemed a bit aggressive, but wasn't terrible in practice. Keep in mind, though, it wasn't that first group, so the numbers could be a bit inflated, but we are talking about arguably the best driver of Martinsville the past few seasons. He's first in just about every single category here, the most fantasy points, the best average running position, the most dominator points, 3 top 5s. I dominated this race last year. Didn't win, his teammate William Byron did, but it's hard not to have some interest in Chase Elliott. He could be a decent pivot off of Ryan Blaney. It's just a little bit scary rostering a guy with a broken leg because, you know, if something gets irritated throughout the race, it just might not be as aggressive as we may want him to be. So something to keep in mind, but I think Elliott's kind of interesting in tournaments just because the price is so low on him. Tyler Reddick, 9,100 bucks. He's starting in 6th. He is free on FanDuel, 8,200 bucks. I assume the ownerships can be pretty high over there. Now, I'll tell you right now that 28-1 will not be the case when DraftKings updates these odds. And once I'm done talking about Reddick, I'll go check and see if they updated. But was very fast in practice. Fell off a little bit in the longer run to guys like Kevin Harvick and William Byron, but still looked very good, which I wasn't expecting Reddick to look that good because he just historically is not very good at Martinsville. 6 races here, average finish of 20th, running position of 19.8, and only 1 top 15 to show for. But moving over to 2311 Racing, maybe this changes things. He's starting in 6th, and he had a super fast car in practice. And I know the guys that are good in Martinsville are typically good here, and the guys that aren't usually don't surprise you too much. But Reddick, moving teams, this might be the thing he needed to help him in Martinsville, and it seems like he's got a really fast car, so you can't ignore that. So Reddick's got to be on our radar. Dropping down to the 8K range, we have the similar play to Ryan Blaney here. Ross Chastain at only $8,800, and he's starting in 34th. So expect some pretty heavy ownership here. He was fast in the short run in practice. Wasn't that first group, got to keep in mind. But P3 and P5 fell off a little bit in the long run. But he's not going to be a 34th place car. The only thing you'd have to worry about is him going a lap down early if he can't just pass guys early on. So that'd be the only concern. The Ross Chastain had some place differential last year and ended up getting 2 good finishes. So I don't think he's a bad play by any means. Projection-wise, he's going to grade out very well. But again, there's pivots to be had, like Ross Chastain will more than likely have higher ownership than a guy like Kevin Harvick or Daniel Suarez. But, if Harvick comes out and leads 100 laps because he looks like he's got a very fast car, you'd rather have Harvick in that situation if he can break the slate with over 100 fantasy points. Because Ross Chastain, super high floor, but that ceiling is going to be lacking compared to some of these guys up front that do have the dominator potential. So cash game lock, yeah, pretty much. But for tournaments, you just got to be careful with that, with the guys starting in the rear of the field. Because if they get stuck and go a lap down, they're not going to be paying off like you want them to. But in cash games, it's not really something to think about too much. Chase Briscoe, $8,600. He's starting in 4th. And the Stewart-Haas cars, this is the first one we're talking about. It looks like they were just cheating in qualifying. They were super fast. And Briscoe isn't terrible at Martinsville. He does have a couple of top 10s here. And if you're looking at practice, wasn't very good compared to like Kevin Harvick, who absolutely killed it, his teammate. You really can't compare anybody on Stewart-Haas to Kevin Harvick. That's just not fair because of how good he is. He's an all-timer. But he was also in that second group, so times overall going to be a bit lower because, Kevin Harvick got the run in that first group. So I think Briscoe is interesting for tournaments. And again, if you're just trying to get off that Chastain ownership, he's definitely a viable pivot. Kevin Harvick, $8,400. I'll tell you what, there is not a price tag in all of DFS that fluctuates as much as Kevin Harvick. He'll be 11K one week, he'll be 6K the next week. Now he's back to 8K. And while I know Martinsville, I know he's great at short flat tracks, but Martinsville's a short flat track, but it's a bit unique, and Kevin Harvick just isn't as good here as he is at the other short flats, but looked pretty good in practice, and he was in that first group, keep in mind. But all the Stewart-Haas cars look very good. He qualified well, so he's got some speed in that car, and every single time on a short flat track, got to have some interest in Harv. And even if he doesn't dominate here, starting in 7th, he's only $8,400. It's not like we're spending 11K for Kevin Harvick like he's William Byron starting in the same spot as him. If Kevin Harvick can kind of chill around the top 5 all day, pick up some fast laps and a couple of these PD plays like Ross Chastain and Alex Bowman bust, Kevin Harvick's not in a bad spot at all. So I definitely want some action on Harvick there. And I'm not trying to make it seem like he sucks at Martinsville. He doesn't, but just compared to other tracks, like the other short flats in the series, like Phoenix and Richmond, he's just not going to look as good, obviously. Then we have Alex Bowman, $8,200. He's starting in 23rd, was in that unfortunate second group that just got killed in their practice time, so it's going to look pretty bad here, but you have to imagine he's going to be faster than that during the race. So he's a viable option here starting back in 2030. He's won a Martinsville before, and 3 top 10s here the past 5 races for Alex Bowman. So over 50% of the time, past few seasons, he's been running inside that top 10. So Bowman, he's fine. He's not going to grade out as well as Ross Chastain or maybe even Kevin Harvick, because I think you have to give him some dominator points in that projection, but he's a viable option because he's the cheapest Hendrick car. Daniel Suarez, $8,000, really cheap on FanDuel, only $6,500. He is starting in 2nd. Wasn't too bad in practice. Wasn't that first group though, you got to keep in mind. But I don't think he's going to suck in this race. And if you're playing over on FanDuel, that price tag's kind of hard to ignore for a guy that can run around the top 6 for the majority of the day. Now, I do think he's going to fall back. But I think a lot of people will flock to Ryan Preece to be an early dominator just because he's so cheap. You compare him with a couple other doms to get 3 dom builds. But Daniel Suarez is the pivot there. He's only $600 more, and if he grabs a lead early on, I assume the ownership's going to be lower than Ryan Preece. So keep him on your GPP radar. Dropping down to the 7K range, we have Chris Buescher, $7,800, only 72 over on FanDuel. And this is kind of the range I was hoping the RFK cars would be. Unfortunately, Brad Keselowski qualified a bit worse, so the ownership's going to be a little bit higher. But Chris Buescher is not a bad pivot here, starting in 10th. It wasn't bad in practice. Again, though, keep in mind, he was in the faster practice group, so numbers could be a bit inflated. And if you're looking at Keselowski, he was in the second group, and you can see the drastic difference here from teammates just from being in one group compared to the other, just to go show you how much faster the track was. But Buescher is not a bad play here. He's not a bad Martinsville driver, typically a guy that will finish around 10th to 15th place. And while he does not offer you a place differential like a Brad Keselowski or an Austin Dillon or a Bowman in this price range, he's someone that can definitely hold ground and stay within that top 12. So definitely viable in tournaments. Brad Keselowski, $7,700. I was kind of hoping Keselowski would be the one that starts 10th and Chris Buescher the one that starts 21st, because I was all aboard Brad Keselowski this week, and he's been really fast at the short flat tracks this year, top 10 in green flag speed at Richmond and Phoenix, and obviously a very good driver. Martinsville used to be in Team Penske though, so these numbers are going to be a bit beefier, but past 6 races, 4 top 5s, and basically just always contending for top 10s here. So starting in 21st, I think we need to ignore the practice speed there just because he's in the second group and they got nuked. So I think Keselowski is going to be a fine play. Austin Dillon, not really someone I have a ton of interest in. He's at $7,500. Wasn't that second group, but I am just not a big fan of RCR in general this week. He could surprise. I mean, he surprised last year at Martinsville, got that top 5 finish, but not really seeing it from AD this week. I'd rather play Ryan Preece on the pole, to be honest, just because if he ends up leading the majority of the first stage, I mean, $7,400 for a dominator at Martinsville. That's hard to pass up, and we know he's good at short tracks. And Ryan Preece is a good driver, and the Stewart-Haas cars look pretty good. So starting in first here on the pole, it's a little bit scary. It really is, and it's not like he's a lock to dominate. Daniel Suarez could get him at the jump. You have Eric Almirola behind him, but he's a teammate, so hopefully he wouldn't screw him too bad. And you also have Chase Briscoe up there, so he's got some good company to be in, a bunch of teammates. And it's not like the field up front's strong. Like if Ryan Preece was starting right beside William Byron, I would say, yeah, he's probably going to get passed pretty soon. But when you have guys like Daniel Suarez, Eric Almirola, Chase Briscoe, just all right around you, Martin Truex would be the main threat there, starting us at the top 5. I think he could lead some laps early on. It's not like we need 100 laps out of Preece. If Ryan Preece can lead you like 40 laps, get a little bit of fast laps mixed in there, and finish within the top 10, that's not terrible at his price point. If he was a little bit cheaper, I would say, heck yeah, $7,400. So, it's not as easy, but he'll definitely project decently well if you give him a good chunk of stage 1. So Ryan Preece definitely should be on our radar. Eric Almirola, $7,200. He's starting in third. Hard to get there. I love him at short flat tracks, but man, the starting spot's going to be rough. I mean, 3 top 10s here the past 6 races. If you're looking at practice, definitely wasn't bad for Eric, and he was in that second group, so it wasn't like it was terrible compared to these other guys. Like Ryan Preece was in the second group, Dylan was in the second group, so was Keselowski, and his numbers were much better than there. So it looks like he's got a decent car. I think he'd be a top 10 contender, but I mean, starting in third, he's probably going to have to pick up some fast laps along the way. And at that point, I feel like I'd rather just play Ryan Preece. Bubba Wallace, $7,100. He's starting in 9th. Martinsville's not a bad track for him, and he was in the second group, and you probably wouldn't think that looking at his practice speeds, but he actually had a pretty fast car. So for tournaments, I don't think Bubba Wallace is a bad play. I'd rather play him over Eric Almirola, and you could even make a case for him over Ryan Preece if you think Preece gets passed early on. So Bubba Wallace at that price point, definitely not a fade, even though it never feels comfortable rostering Bubba. Ty Gibbs, $6,900. Apparently the top 10 machine was in that second group. He's starting in 12th. Obviously practice won't look as strong. I mean, although Bubba, he was in a similar car and he was much faster. So we'll see how Ty Gibbs rolls. I feel like he'll kind of stay around where he starts, which isn't bad at that price point. It's just not going to pop off in projections. But I think I'd rather play Ty Gibbs over Austin Cindric. That tells you much. So speaking of Cindric, I just don't really have much interest here, starting in 25th. Looking at how he's done at Martinsville so far, a 2-race sample size from last year, average finish of 19, running position of 19.1, had a top 15, but not expecting much out of Cindric. Like starting in 25th, he might project better than a guy like Ty Gibbs or Allmendinger, but I kind of like Gibbs better in tournaments, and I guess Allmendinger might grade a little bit better as well for tournaments, just because the ownership should be a little bit lower. Fast in practice, wasn't that first group though, but I do like Dinger at these kind of tracks, so don't think he's the worst play in the world. And I wouldn't say there's a bunch of great cheap plays this week either, so I'm not going to try to get too picky down low. So, I mean, Dinger's going to filter in lineups. Eric Jones just sucks. I don't see myself playing Eric Jones. He's starting in 28th. He's just slow. Yes, I know he was in the second group, but he just straight up sucks this season. So I don't think I have much interest in Eric Jones. Justin Haley starting in 26. Not bad. I mean, his teammate AJ Allmendinger was pretty fast. I mean, he's kind of on par with AJ Allmendinger in the short run, but I've definitely Dinger looked a little bit better there in the 10, 15 lap run. So we'll see. I mean, Haley offers you more play differential upsides. I don't think he's the worst play, but I'm not excited about it. Michael McDowell, $6,200. Wasn't that first group, so maybe overinflated times, but still didn't look too bad. Top 15 across the board here. Problem is, Martinsville hasn't really been a great track for Michael McDowell. Only 2 top 20s the past few seasons here. Average running position of 23rd, which is right on par with his average finish. If you're looking at short flat tracks in general over the past couple of seasons now, 10 race sample size, Again, average finish, average rank position around 22nd place. So he's okay starting in 20th, but I feel like he's just going to finish right around there, maybe lose a couple spots, which isn't bad at his price point. Like, if you get a top 20 out of a guy that's $6,200 starting in 20th, you could definitely do worse. I prefer him over Ricky Stenhouse, who I just hate rostering at the short flat tracks and pretty slow in practice, 33rd, 32nd, 28th. So if I had to pick between the two, yeah, I'll go with Michael McDowell, and I'd rather play Michael McDowell over guys like Zane Smith and probably Harrison Burton, although Harrison Burton had a good run last year here. So maybe I shouldn't hate on Michael McDowell too much. We'll throw him in the player pool. But yeah, the cheap plays kind of suck this week. So I guess we can't really rule anybody out like a Michael McDowell. Forgot to mention Zane Smith really quick. So he was in the 13 car when he had that decent run. He's in the car for Cody Ware this week. And well, we're not going to see Cody Ware anytime soon or probably ever again. So yeah, he's in a junker this week. So I really wouldn't expect too much. Yeah, the practice times weren't bad, but keep in mind, it wasn't that first group, and the car just sucks. And he should probably price a little bit lower. I mean, Zane Smith's a better driver than Cody Ware, don't get me wrong, but the equipment's just not very good. Burton, starting in 32nd. Don't hate him. I mean, if you need a cheap driver, he might be the best option outside of Corey LaJoie. He's only $5,000, even though he just holds position every single time. So, I mean, LaJoie might be the popular play down low just because he's that cheap and wasn't that bad in practice. I mean, he was in the first group, so times can be inflated, but he's been the king of holding ground all season long. But Burton, 32nd, obviously plays differential upside. Did have that good run in Martinsville, the most recent race where I believe he finished 11th, I want to say. Yeah, I believe that's what it was. He had the one top 15. So Burton, he's okay. Todd Gillen, he's starting in 13th. Definitely wasn't that good in practice. I mean, Gillen's been pretty good, though. And, I mean, I think the guy's a pretty solid driver. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Gillen kind of hangs around like the top 18. But to project him for a top 20 finish, I'm just not going to be able to do that. But he's going to have much lower ownership than guys like Harrison Burton, Zane Smith, Corey LaJoie. So if you're looking for the pivot and you just hope Todd Gillen holds the top 15, you can do that, but it's not going to feel great. Noah Gragson, he also sucks this year, but not the worst play in Martinsville, but I think I'd still rather get to like a Corey LaJoie, starting a few spots further up for a little bit cheaper. I just feel like I can trust him more. I mean, Legacy has not had any speed at all this season. Ty Dillon, $5,100. He's starting in 35th. It's just hard to trust Ty because that car falls apart each and every single week. He was slow in practice. Yeah, I just don't really see much redeeming qualities about Ty Dillon to want to roster him this week, even though he's in the back. But look, if it's your last piece fit, whatever, I guess. Corey LaJoie, his teammate, $5,000 starting at 27th. I'd rather play LaJoie over Ty Dillon. I mean, he's definitely more capable of getting a top 25 than Ty Dillon is. He's got a little bit of track position to work with, and I mean, instantly Ty Dillon's going to go down laps. I mean, it's going to be pretty quick for him, more than likely. So I think Corey LaJoie's definitely got a better chance of staying in the lap. I'm not expecting that, but I mean, he's definitely got a better shot. I mean, he's not going to be in the lap, so I would say a better shot of maybe not being like 4 laps down compared to Ty Dillon. JJ Yaley starting in 36. He's dead last. No thanks. Probably going to be there. Anthony Alfredo, $4,800 starting in 30th. Again, no thanks. That car just has no speed. But with that being said, guys, that's all I got for you this week. I hope you did enjoy. And if you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Hope to see you all in the live stream tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.